What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Riot Shield in Modern Warfare 2 since it's causing a bit of a stir in the community, and there are clearly some objective issues with this as well as some more subjective issues, and I wanted to talk a little bit about both of those today, share some of the issues that I've found with it, as well as my take on the Riot Shield in its current state in the game. And diving right in, let's first talk about the objective issues, things not working as they should be with the Riot Shield. And with this, it just seems like there are some very clear bugs with the Riot Shield still, even after they fixed the God Mode glitch that the Riot Shield allowed for. And with that, this was when the game first launched. This has been patched a while ago. But if you took a certain amount of damage from a VTOL kill streak and blocked that with your Riot Shield, it would actually activate like a God Mode for you, and you were literally invincible after that. And while that has been patched, it looks like there are still some damage or health inconsistencies and issues that are present with the Riot Shield. One thing I noticed with my testing, and this is something that I can replicate fairly consistently, is if you try to bash somebody with a Riot Shield out and you have a Riot Shield as well, it should be a 3-hit kill to the body after the most recent nerf to this. Whereas with this, you can tell the first few bashes here, I'm not actually getting a hit on the enemy player. That player is not taking damage. While I wasn't recording their screen for this, I could clearly see their perspective. They weren't receiving any damage whatsoever from these first few hits, and there was no hit marker present. But then I just suddenly get a 1-hit kill on that player. So I take them from 100 health down to 0, and this shouldn't be possible, but this is something that I'm able to replicate, as you can see here. However, that's not the only health or damage inconsistency I've seen with the Riot Shield that I haven't been able to explain, and my only real explanation for this is it must be a bug with the Riot Shield. First one was from Reddit here. Sorry for the quality, it is really bad, but this is just how it downloaded from Reddit. And with this, you can see the player clearly getting several good hits in on this Riot Shield player. And even if they're using quick fix, they're not standing on top of the objective, they're not able to touch the objective point there. So I don't know how they're able to soak up this much damage. It seems like there's some kind of a bug going on with that. Additionally, a totally different sort of scenario here that seems to be some kind of a health or damage bug relating to the Riot Shield is this situation right here. As you can see, this player gets killed with one single bullet from a Mark II carbine, either to the foot or the leg. That's the only part of the player model that's visible, and while I'm aware that kill cams are never perfectly accurate and you can't trust them to be perfect, it's highly unlikely that it was so far off that this shot actually hit the upper torso, which is required to get a one-shot kill in core game modes with that gun. And while I haven't been able to replicate this, and some people are claiming that this is evidence of skill-based damage, first up, there's no evidence here of the player's skill level, whether that's the enemy or the person that's recording the footage here, and that would be necessary for proving any sort of skill-based damage. But another thing is, if there were skill-based damage, there'd be tons and tons and tons of clips out there like this, and there simply aren't. So I think the far more reasonable explanation here is something funky went on. Some kind of a bug happened, and based on the other issues I've seen with the Riot Shield, I would assume it also relates to the Riot Shield here as well. So while I can't 100% explain this one, something weird is going on here, and I believe it's relating to the Riot Shield. So there we go, there's a few examples of some apparent objective issues with the Riot Shield, especially that first one that I'm able to replicate consistently. There's obviously something weird going on there, and I really hope they're able to figure out whatever's happening, because I don't recall seeing this in any previous Call of Duty games. Now let's move on to the more subjective issues with the Riot Shield. These are things that you may or may not disagree with, but I think the biggest issue that people have currently with the Shield, and this has really been exacerbated with the inclusion of Shipment, this is what I like to call turtling, or using the Riot Shield with the express purpose of using it on your back rather than as a primary weapon to bash people with or block bullets with. You're basically just using it for that free coverage on your back. And this is especially useful on a tiny chaotic map like Shipment, and that's why this wasn't brought up a ton before Shipment, but now that Shipment's here, it's really become a big issue in the community. But with this, in the game's current state, there's not much reason to not use a shield on your back, especially on a small map like that. And the reason for this is there's little to no trade-off or punishment for doing this. With the way that the current perk system is structured, I think this perk system is horrible, by the way. Overkill is a really easy choice because it's one of the 2 base perks that you get for free immediately when the game starts. And in this category, it doesn't really have a ton of competition. I'd say like the competition would be Bomb Squad or Battle Hardened, but since you can use 2 of these perks, you can still combine Overkill with either one of those and still gain those benefits alongside a shield on your back, Whereas in previous Call of Duty games, oftentimes Overkill was in a very competitive tier of perks. So if you picked Overkill, you couldn't get Ghost, or you couldn't get Explosive Resistance. And that was a good way to keep this in check. Whereas now, at least when it comes to the perk structure, there's nothing keeping Overkill in check. Additionally, having that shield on your back comes with no movement penalty whatsoever, since your movement speed is determined by the gun in your hand, not the gun that's on your back, or the total amount of weight that your character is carrying. And another thing is this shield just provides a huge area of protection. It covers almost your entire body from behind, aside from like your calves and your feet. So you're giving the enemy an extremely small target to be shooting at if they get behind you. And with all that in mind, it's really no surprise that you're seeing so many people running around with these shields on their back, especially in that Shipment playlist. There's really no reason not to. And while this is definitely subjective, and some of you guys may think that this is totally fine and there's no issue here with this, many people, myself included, just find this to be a little bit jarring and frustrating to be running into so many people doing this with little to no trade-off involved for gaining that power. And we'd like to see some adjustments specifically targeting having the shield on your back, rather than targeting the shield when using it normally as a primary weapon to block bullets and to bash people with. And unfortunately, that's the area they targeted with the recent nerfs to the Riot Shield, which does come off as a little bit out of touch, because I don't think too many people had too many issues being bashed by a Riot Shield and being killed in just 2 hits rather than the required 3 now. Most of the complaints are regarding the shield on players' backs and the lack of trade-offs involved for that. So this is just where I wanted to share my potential solutions to this to improve the Riot Shield behavior. First off, I'd be totally fine if they just straight up reverted the damage nerf to the shield. I think a 2-hit kill melee is just fine with the Riot Shield. I never really had a huge issue with that in the past. And instead, I'd like them to focus on things that only target the shield on the back. Now, the first and possibly most extreme nerf that they could put in place here, that I could potentially be on board with, at least as an option, is just make it so if you're using the Overkill perk, you can't use the Riot Shield. So that means if you do want to use a Riot Shield on your back, you're stuck with a pistol or a launcher as your primary weapon. And of course, if you want, you could still scavenge primary weapons around on the ground, but you don't get to choose your own primary weapon, and that would be a fair enough trade-off there. Some may see that as a little too extreme though, so another potential option instead of that I really like the sound of is just make it so if you have that shield on your back, you get that slow shield movement speed 100% of the time, regardless of the gun in your hand. So whether that shield's in front of you or on your back, have a really slow movement speed, which would hold you back, and that could at least make people second guess putting that shield on their back. There would be a noticeable downside to doing so, and it may make some people reconsider. It wouldn't eliminate the issue completely, but it would at least alleviate it a little bit and add a balanced trade-off to selecting that shield on your back. And finally, another solution that I've got here that would require a whole lot of work, but I think would make the game far better in a lot of other ways, not just relating to the Riot Shield, is just a full-on perk overhaul. Since the beta of this game, the reception that I've seen for the perk system that they're using has been overwhelmingly negative. There are very few people that I've seen that prefer this perk system. And that's just talking about the perk system itself. There's also just the balance between the different tiers, I think, is all over the place when it comes to the perks. And if they were to rework this in a way that was much more traditional, and they made sure that Overkill had a lot of tough competition in the same tier of perks, and if you're using Overkill, you have to sacrifice something very noticeable to gain that, that's another thing that could effectively just solve this issue, while also potentially improving the overall perk balance in the game. Now, this one, I admit, is much more of a stretch to be asking for, but it is something that I think would be excellent to see, and they could be knocking out far more than 2 birds with 1 stone if they were to do a full-on perk overhaul for this game. I still think there's so many gameplay-related issues in this game and so much room for improvement when it comes to the perk system, and a perk overhaul could solve so many of the issues with this game while improving playstyle variety drastically. But with that, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about today when it comes to the Riot Shield. I definitely think they need to figure out whatever's going on with the damage or health inconsistencies with the Riot Shield, and I'd love to see them specifically target the Riot Shield on players' backs, without really damaging its viability as a primary weapon, using it as it was intended. But those are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear from you guys in the comment section down below. What do you think of the current state of the Riot Shield in Modern Warfare 2? Would you like to see any buffs or nerfs, or do you think it's just fine as it is? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.